Number 10. The Men with the Remote. My dad told me this story from when he was about 10. It still gives me the chills, and I think it genuinely disturbed him, though he never let on. He was home alone, watching TV in the living room, the only one in the house. Suddenly, the old unreliable set just switched off. Annoying, but not weird. He got up, turned it back on, and sat down. It shut off again. He repeated this a few more times. As he reached for it yet again, he decided to find the remote control first. He walked over to the couch, leaned down to check behind it, and that's when he saw him, a man, crouched in the corner, holding the TV remote. My dad said the man had long messy hair, a crazed look in his eyes, and a terrifyingly wide smile. My dad just ran, screaming, right out the front door and straight to a neighbor, who called the police. The man was still inside when the police arrived and was arrested. Dad always assumed he was either homeless or mentally disturbed. Either way, the sheer audacity and stillness of that man holding the remote is nightmare fuel. Number 9. A Mother's Intuition. A friend of mine was 8 or 9 when this happened. She was walking home from school, reaching for the key to unlock her front door, as her single mother usually worked late. But just as her hand touched the door, it swung open. Her mom was standing there in a dressing gown, having come home sick. Instead of a normal greeting, her mother looked straight past her, her eyes wide with alarm, and asked in a strained voice, "Who are you?" My friend spun around just in time to see a man in a long coat hurry back down the path and disappear down the street. Her mother's spontaneous illness that day likely interrupted a potentially horrible situation. Number 8. The Finger at the Door. Jacob's parents had a troubled relationship, mainly due to his mother's addiction. One night, while Jacob and his father were asleep, they were woken by a series of loud banging and scratching noises coming from the mother's room. Jacob's father rushed down the hall, slamming on her door. She finally opened it, yelling at him for waking her up, insisting she hadn't heard anything. But something was wrong. The window was wide open, and the television had been moved across the room, still plugged in, but with the screen turned to face outside. Scared, Jacob's dad shut the window, locked his mother's room from the outside, and made her sleep in the living room while he stayed up. Around 5 a.m., before dawn, he woke Jacob. In the kitchen, where the mother already was, Jacob's dad entered, wide-eyed, and held a finger to his lips. They all went silent. They heard shuffling sounds on the roof, moving from edge to edge. Jacob's father grabbed a baseball bat. Minutes later, the sound vanished. They called Jacob's grandmother, who agreed to let them stay at her place. As Jacob finished eating, he went to sit on the living room couch. He glanced over at an open door to an empty room in the hallway. A finger, unnaturally long and thick, was wrapped clear around the side of the door frame. Jacob screamed. His father grabbed him, and they fled, his mother following. They sat at a gas station until the grandmother arrived. Jacob described the finger as looking unnatural, like an elongated foam finger. They never returned to that house, only going back once to collect their things. Nothing was stolen, but the window in that empty room was also found open. Number 7. The Peering Face. When I was 13, my bedroom was on a separate floor, far from my parents', a setup perfect for my already overactive imagination. One rainy night, I woke up around 2 a.m. with a sense of unease. I looked toward the foot of my bed and saw a rounded shadow just over the edge. My heart pounded until I realized it was just my hat, which I sometimes hung on the bedpost. I calmed myself and fell back asleep. About 30 minutes later, I woke again, startled by the same shadow. Once again, I remembered the hat and drifted off. It happened a third time. Now, I was thirsty. I reached my hand down to the side of the bed for my water bottle. Instead, my fingers closed around the fabric of my hat. In that split second, my heart plunged. I lunged for the lamp switch, nearly falling out of bed. The sudden light revealed the face of a man peering right over the edge of the mattress, staring directly into my eyes. I let out the loudest scream I could manage, bolted past him, and ran down the stairs. I felt him try to grab me, but I made it to my parents' room. By the time my dad grabbed his baton and got back to my room, the man was gone. The window was wide open. He had apparently jumped out onto the patio roof. Number 6. The charging figure in the woods. As a kid, my whole block played manhunt, hide and seek, in our collective yards and the woods behind our houses. Our one rule: don't go more than a backyard's length into the trees. I had a great hiding spot behind an old, rusty barrel in the woods. One night, there were only 6 of us. My friends, Joe and Raj, were on my team. We were the first to hide. I ran to my usual spot, but it was unnaturally quiet. I finally heard footsteps nearby, but no flashlight beam, so I figured it was a teammate. I whispered Joe's and Raj's names. The footsteps didn't stop. Whoever it was started charging at me, sprinting. I shot up and ran out of the woods, planning to find a new spot in my backyard. But no one followed. When I got to the front yard, I saw Joe, Raj, and the others, surrounded by our parents. Everyone looked relieved to see me. They explained that a police officer had just driven by and warned them about a serial rapist spotted in the area, advising all kids to stay inside. When I told them about the charging figure in the woods, my parents freaked out. They called the police immediately. I still don't know if he was ever caught, but I try not to dwell on what would have happened if that person had reached me. Number 5. The Loud Sigh. When I was around 12, my mom, stepdad, our 2 dogs, and I rented a beachfront apartment for a weekend. It was late, maybe 9 p.m., when we got back from dinner. My parents and the dogs slept on a pull-out couch in the living room, leaving me the bedroom with the king-sized bed. Since there was no internet, I played pre-installed games on my computer until very late. Finally, I decided to go to sleep. After about 5 minutes of lying there in complete silence, I heard it, an extremely loud, distinct sigh. It was definitely not my parents or the dogs, as the living room door was closed. I shot out of that room, heart pounding, absolutely terrified, and went to sleep in the spare bedroom opposite the master bedroom. I got no sleep that night. The next morning, my parents dismissed it as imagination, but I was certain it was real. Number 4. The Grabbing Foot. I was staying at my friend Mike's place in North Carolina for a job interview, 2 hours from my company. I landed the job and we celebrated that night with friends and a lot of beers. People were coming and going all night. Mike wasn't careful about guests. Around 4 a.m., everyone left, and we called it a night. I stumbled upstairs to the bathroom. As I splashed hot water on my face, I caught a glimpse of something in the periphery. I turned to the half-open door and saw a single eye peering at me through the crack. I let out a loud curse and, in my drunken state, fell to the floor. When I got back up, the eye was gone. I yelled for Mike, and he responded from downstairs in the kitchen. It couldn't have been him. I shrugged it off as too much alcohol and practically collapsed into the guest bed. I passed out instantly. I woke up an unknown time later with a terrible headache, just before sunrise. The room was cold. My foot was hanging out over the edge of the covers. Then, I felt something incredibly cold grab my foot and start stroking it. A raspy voice whispered, "Can you help me?" I sat up, screamed at the top of my lungs, and sprinted out of the room, meeting Mike at the top of the stairs. We called the police. The intruder was a woman in her late 40s, clearly suffering from addiction. She admitted to simply walking in and hiding in a closet. The eye I saw was hers. Now, I always make sure my feet are covered by the sheets. Number 3. Footprints in the blizzard. 3 friends and I were on a skiing trip near South Lake Tahoe, staying in a large log cabin. On the 3rd night, during a fierce blizzard, I got up for a glass of water. As I crossed the cabin toward the kitchen, there was a frantic knock at the front door. Spooked, I thought about ignoring it, but I figured they knew we were home, my car was outside, and maybe someone was in trouble. I waited. The knocking came again, louder and more desperate. "Who is it?" I asked. No answer. I asked again. Silence. Curiosity winning, I opened the door a crack, the chain lock still on. No one was there. I undid the lock and opened the door fully. There were footprints in the deep snow leading away from the cabin. For some foolish reason, perhaps guilt, I slipped on my boots and jacket and followed them before they could be completely covered. The tracks led me to the edge of the property, and stopped. I mean, they completely ended. No sign of a vehicle, no drag marks, no struggle. It was as if whoever made them had simply been standing still right where I was, and vanished. Deeply disturbed, I ran back to the cabin, slammed the door, and locked it. Before I could even process what I'd seen, the frantic knocking started again. My heart hammered, and I screamed for my friends. They rushed down. When we opened the door, no one was there. The footprints were already filled with snow. I've never been able to prove what happened, and while my friends don't believe me, I know it happened. Number 2. The Screaming Birds. My friend and I were going to a party a few hours away, so we decided to stay at her family's holiday house about an hour south of the venue. It was winter, and the holiday town was deserted. Before we left for the party, I struggled with the front gate. I worried about getting stuck opening it late at night, but decided to shut it for security anyway. The party was great. We got back around 12:30 a.m., and the gate was open. I knew I had closed and locked it, and the wind couldn't have done it. I was immediately on edge but didn't want to alarm my friend. We went inside to make a snack. As I walked through the house, my friend raced from the kitchen and virtually tackled me in the hallway. She was convinced she'd heard someone walking around outside. We had no cell service and were completely isolated. For the next half hour, we sat in the hallway, paralyzed with fear, listening to footsteps outside and the sound of the back door being jimmied. We decided we had to make a break for the car. Just as we reached the front door, there was a huge bang in the backyard, and suddenly, what sounded like hundreds of birds started screaming. We bolted, starting the car with all our belongings still on our laps. As we reversed out of the driveway, we saw a figure running up the side of the house toward us. We sped away and didn't sleep at all that night. Number 1. The Boiler Room. When I was 10 and my youngest brother Ben was 1, my parents were painting our rooms, so we had to sleep in the pitch-dark basement. I slept on a pull-out couch, and Ben had a crib. Being 10, the basement was creepy, but Ben's occasional middle-of-the-night cries somehow made it less scary. I would tend to him, and the activity was a comfort. But one time, I woke up to him screaming, not crying, screaming like no 1-year-old should. I was immediately terrified and ran over to him. He was standing up in his crib, looking at me, but pointing into the pitch-dark boiler room right next to the crib. 1,000 knives couldn't have made me feel the dread I felt then. Through the terror, I faintly heard something fall over in the boiler room. I felt profoundly watched. I grabbed Ben and ran as fast as I could. I have never been back down in that basement.